Hello, everybody. This is Erik. Um, it's funny, I'm looking at the screen and wondering if it's going to be bright enough. I think the screen's bright enough, but do you need to see my face? That's the funny thing. So, um, lots to share. I thought I would do a little preamble talking about how to do step 4 in our daily life. Um, I will say that I've been, well, it's not surprising. There's always opportunities for resentments or anger or fears. And recently, I've been very frustrated with, I'll just say, two situations that seem to be so similar that were pile on each other, and it was beginning to ferment. It's what I call resentahol. And resentment is horrible in that it really objectifies people. It sees people as objects, like they're not real. So that then I don't really look at their story. I just see myself as right and they're wrong. And the 12 steps helps me to look at my part in things, to look at how I'm wearing the black hat in this Western of life. I think Frederica Matthews Green, a Christian writer, NPR host or speaker, would talk about how is it in the Western of life we're always wearing the white hat. It's stuck with me because it seems to be that that's how we're oriented, that I'm right and everybody else is wrong. So I had to ask myself and pray to God, God, save me from being angry. I know this resentment is not going to help me in recovery. Help me to be helpful. It says, help me to see that the people who are upsetting me are perhaps spiritually sick. It says, help me to see them as perhaps spiritually sick too, meaning I am sick too. So we have to, if we want to be happy and recover, we can't hold on to any resentments, no matter how justified we feel. So I thought I would start with that. I also wanted to say, as I was praying and meditating about this, some of this meditation was not good in that I was thinking to it and trying to meditate on the good sense of the word. I realized I was upset more of a denial. And it says in the AA book, I know we're going to talk about step 4, but we get mad at a principle. And what is the principle we could be mad at? Well, one of them could be denial, that if you have people in denial, it could get you upset. It's one of my buttons. And here I work as a therapist, so I have to be mindful of this, that people are doing the best they know to do. Everybody has a story. And I just have to be patient, tolerant, kind, and then it'll all kind of work out. I thought this was humorous. A little bit of levity helps sometimes. I'll just hold it to the screen and then see what you think there. So, honey, I've been sober for a whole day. I've stopped dating most of your sisters, and I'm almost cured of my need to always lie. Oh, darling, at last we can get married. That's hilarious. What's horrible is actually there are some people where this is almost how they're living their life. They're picking another alcoholic. They're picking another sexaholic. They don't even know that they're jumping into the same thing. I don't want to put anybody down, but I'll say this, but we met in treatment. And it's like, no, don't meet in treatment. It's not a good place to meet people. I'm not saying that God couldn't work there, but that's denial. And denial is just total unawareness. It's not lying. It's not like I deny that I took the cookies from the cookie jar. It's like, what cookie jar? Like, What are you talking about? Like, you really think I have a problem with this? It's like, it's just really not there. So it's very primitive. And so to come out of denial, one needs someone who's going to be kind, patient, loving, tolerant for the process. Denial is there for a reason. It's a coping mechanism. And I also think the spiritual forces that blind us to seeing our own addiction. Step 5 is about the loving process, the supernatural process by which we share with God, ourselves. So we shared with God, ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Okay. I'm not sure this lighting is working, and I don't have readers, so I'm going to turn on some light here. We're just going to change things. Hold on. I once was blind and now I see. So we don't have distractions here. So how do we do this? Oh, here's another funny thing. And I'll put this up. Wait a minute. Nope, that's not the one. So this is true. If you just trust me, then I wouldn't have to lie to you. Gosh, you're right. Can you ever forgive me? And a lot of people that struggle with lying do so because they feel like people would overreact if I tell them the truth. So they have it all justified. They partly overreact because the more you lie, the more distrusting the situation is. Boy, I feel like doing this tonight just to bring us some levity here. This is a greeting card, the 12 Steps of Insanity. And I'll try to put this on the link in the description below. If you know anything about the steps, these are the opposite of the steps. And you could almost diagnose yourself as having an addiction, whether you do any of these. This 12 Steps of Insanity, and forgive me if I stumble over, I don't have any readers. It's bizarre how that happened. 1, we admitted that we were powerless over nothing. We could manage our own lives perfectly and could manage anyone else who would allow it. 2, came to believe that there was no power greater than ourselves and the rest of the world was insane. 3, made a decision to have loved ones and friends turn their lives over to our care. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of everyone we knew. 5, admitted to the world and at large the exact nature of their wrongs. Gossip. 6, were entirely ready to make others straighten up and do right. 7, demanded others to either shape up or ship out. 8, made a list of anyone who had ever harmed us and became willing to get revenge or get even at any lengths to get even with them all. Yeah. 9, got direct revenge on such people except when possible, except when to do so would cost their own lives or at very least a jail sentence. 10, continued to take inventory of others and when they were wrong, promptly and repeatedly told them about it. 11, sought through nagging to improve our relations with others as we couldn't understand them at all and asking that they only knuckle under and do things our way. 12, having had a complete physical, emotional, and spiritual breakdown as a result of these steps. We tried to blame it on others and get sympathy and pity in all our affairs. I think this is hilarious, but there's a lot of truth to this. When I'm not doing well, I'm doing this. So let's get into step 5. Step 5 is really, when I do this practically, it's steps 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. It's all combined together. I don't really separate them, because I think to do step 4 all by oneself is a mistake. It's better to have someone just right there to help you with that. On the middle of page 69, we're doing kind of a preview of what, or not a preview, but a review of step 4. It says, we reviewed our conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. Okay? So we reviewed our own conduct. We don't review the conduct of others. It's just not how this program works. Does it seem like we all are bent towards reviewing the conduct of others? Yeah, it just seems that way. And so we constantly have to say, I need to be blind to other people's problems. I have so many problems to change or repent from. I need to just do that now. That's not being selfish. That's actually being helpful to the world, to try to be purified in my passions, as the early church talked about it. There was a Saint Seraphim of Sarov. You can look him up. He said that acquire the spirit of peace and others will flock to you, meaning they'll find God in the process of you just working on your own self. How do we acquire this divine energy? By experiencing the removal of these passions. What I like about 12 steps is there's a certain specificity about all this. Like, have we been selfish? So this will be something you'll be doing every day, but in your 4th step, you go, well, I was selfish in that I did this, this, and this in my addiction. Or even not in your addiction. It's this idea that I was unfaithful. I took money and bought things for myself. I insisted that we do things my way. Selfish also has to do with an inflated sense of self, that I tried to do everything in my own strength. Or I'm too bad a person. Too bad a person is still selfish. Another word could be pride. Dishonest. So this is where it stings. We just ask ourselves, where did I lie? Was I withholding information? What you see is what you get. Inconsiderate. Very precise, like, how am I inconsiderate today? This is things I could do for my wife or people. I was going to say children. My child is 22 years old and my daughter is quite older than that. This really does help. It's at first you go, this can't be right. It's like eating vegetables. I had this great conversation with someone today and they said, it's like eating vegetables. It is. Apart from that you don't like it at first, especially when you're a kid, you will be so much healthier in the long run. So we ask ourselves, where was I inconsiderate when you're doing your inventory? For those whose faith tradition has a confession, which this mimics this, that's why they got it. I mean, this is why it's there, because this was discovered in America when these Oxford groups were looking at early Christian practices that seemed to be missing in their churches. So these groups asked themselves, how do we do an examination of our conscience? And this is the guide. Where were we at fault? Okay, and I think in the 4th step it says entirely, blocking out of our minds the wrongs of others. That's kind of like like, this sounds childish, but da 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 da. I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear about what the world, how bad the world is. In fact, I thought about this tonight. I've made a decision, at least for now, to just not read anything more about how bad the world is, or the end of the world, or how bad the government is, all that stuff. I realize my understanding of Jesus's life on earth, he didn't spend a lot of time putting down the Roman government. He really didn't spend a lot of time talking about how bad evil is and what are they doing next, on and on. I mean, it's not that he didn't. When the Pharisees were dragging the woman caught in a sin of adultery, he did write out, it appears, their sins on the ground. But maybe that was pretty discreet, really. He did come across pretty strong against the church people, the Pharisees of the time, and pretty harsh with them. But it seems that this need to look at how bad what's going on in the world is not the path for me. What does it do to me when I do that? I'm just looking at someone else's faults. It's fault finding. It's finding the faults in everybody else. I need to find my own faults here. Say, like, I only have so much time to live and to repent. I don't have time to do all that. And I'm going to be spending time reading things from Christian sources, particularly early Christian sources, that I know are tried and true, rather than the latest person on the internet who's telling us to run for our lives or do this or don't do that. So I just thought I would throw it out there. And because if it's disturbing, if it's fear-oriented, is it even true? I've found that some of these things aren't even true that's being out there. So that violates the dishonesty piece. So anyway, what should we have done instead? So we look again at what could I have done better? And this is mimicking what you're going to see in step 10 and 11, which we'll get to. It's a big step. We review our sex life. And for anybody with any addiction, it says in page 69, now they start looking at the sex life, and this includes romance, and was it selfish or not? Okay, but I think we can expand this to just in life in general. Is it selfish what we're wanting? And then we ask God to mold our ideals. So the book here in page 69 says, so once you get this all on paper, it says, in this way we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life, or a life in general. We subjected each solution to this test. Was it selfish or not? Yeah, that's, you've heard the phrase, what would Jesus do? Another phrase is this selfish of me or not? You would think that, well, psychology says look out for self. But if I try to give up self, the Bible actually says, if I lose my life for the sake of the kingdom, I will gain it. If I try to grab happiness, I'm not going to be happy. If I let go of trying to be happy, I actually get happy and accept my circumstances as they are. Remember always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. So you're going to see a balance there. And he later talks about imbalance, this page 69. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. Now, the ideal, I think this has to do with, I want to be more kind. I need to be more helpful around the house. I need to be getting rid of fault finding or critical spirit, but more accepting and patient. So I have to be willing to grow towards that. I could smile it with my words, but if I'm not willing to grow towards it, I'll be in trouble. And it says, we must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. So we have to be willing to make amends. That's step 8 and 9. And why? Because it blocks us from God's power. Think of the tunnel, the artery, okay? So we ask God to help us live up to these ideals, to be able to make amends. Again, his divine energy is what empowers us to do any of this work. And that's how different it is than psychology, because psychology just presupposes you have the power to do this. So we almost need constant tapping on our shoulder because we'll get stuck. We'll be frustrated. We'll go, I don't want to do this, or I'm so mad. It's like, wait a minute. That's Erik relying on Erik Bohlin power. Oh, that's right. So God, help me change my mind here. Help me to be kind. Help me to be forgiving. Help me to not overeat. Help me not to oversex or to overspend or to gamble or to drink or drug. But most importantly, those addictions, if I just pray those over and over, it's not a poor prayer. It's just that a better prayer is to look at these 4 things. Am I selfish, dishonest? So the answer to selfishness is selflessness, getting out of the way. I must decrease so he can increase. I must not want what I want to happen in the world. I need to want whatever God wants to happen in the world. Dishonest, I need to have honesty in my life and to look at myself. In fact, it was like turning on the light. I could be mad at others with their lack of in touch with the reality about the way I see things. Yeah, that's not helpful. I need to look at how am I in denial about my sins, my life. Just focus on that. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. I love this, the bottom of page 69. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Okay? So that's way different than I think a lot of us are geared. We just are already jumping ahead, doing things rather than meditating and say, God, what do you want to have happen in each specific situation? And what do you want me to do? And then wait. Just wait and meditate and pray and maybe have a pencil and paper there handy. This really, in my book, I write step 11, you see over here, because you'll find that these steps all blend together. That's why it's 4, 5, 6, and 7. They really are kind of blending here. And there is just a slide for the we are willing to make amends. That's steps 8 and 9. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. And the right answer will come if we want it. And it's hard to want God's will. You would think, how insane can I be? God's will, his perfect will, would be so right, spot on for every situation I would face. It doesn't work that way. It's almost as if my screen in my life always has Erik's will, God's will, and cancel. Or there's not a little box that says say yes to all future, decisions. Like I could just click God's will and click yes to all future. Answer this always. It doesn't work that way. It would be great. Well, I don't know if it'd be great. It does, if it did. Every day I have to move the cursor, which is defaulted to me, and move it over to God, God, God. And if I remember to do that, I have a blessed day. And God will do so much more than I could ever imagine. It's shocking. It's so shocking to me because I'm so blind. But then if I let him in and let him have his will, his way, it just unfolds. This. Not only will you be sober, you'll have peace. The best possible outcome for difficult situations will be there. This isn't to say that life doesn't have pain. It's just in the midst of that pain, we can find God there with us. And that's what we do when we're humble like this. Okay. I'm on page 70. And this, I'll confess, last night I was working on sex addiction. It's every Monday night, at least for a while, on the sexual recovery. So this could be used, any addiction. I was busy, really busy today, and I didn't have time. Oh, I did, but I didn't catch this one. Page 70, if we fall short of our ideals, we will drink or gamble or lust or work addictively or compulsively overeat or vomit if we're bulimic or become anorexic or be codependent and try to fix the world again. That's kind of how it is. They say in the book, so what do? Well, we just ask God to help us. We're going to fall short, but it's kind of like you keep on doing it, and something begins to snap. I'm not a mechanic, but I always tend to think of a clutch. The way it works is the more it spins, it begins to grab hold and the mini bike goes ahead. So if I just keep on doing the steps, God's grace eventually comes to me and it all works out. I like this phrase on page 70. It says, if we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. Okay. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. Either way, there is a blessing that if we can be so afraid of resentment like we were our addiction, and even then our addiction, we honestly didn't see it as a passion. Passion means two things. One, to suffer. Two, passive comes from it, like it was so part of our nature that we just feel like this is so easy to do. But when we get sick of our passions, we get sick of our selfishness, we get sick of our anger, we get sick of unforgiveness. Hallelujah, because something good will happen. It says, we have begun to learn tolerance. And tolerance doesn't mean I tolerate your beliefs because I believe the same way. No, that's not tolerance. It's one of my pet peeves, and I'm not trying to hold a grudge. It's people want to talk about how tolerant we should be, but they just don't. You just got to grab a dictionary and hopefully grab it fast enough before they change the definition. If I tolerate, and my wife doesn't snore, but if I tolerate my wife snoring, what this means is I don't like her snoring. I don't appreciate snoring, but I tolerate it because our love for each other is more important. The relationship's more important. That is something we tolerate. We're not going to, it's more important than just ending the relationship over. It's kind of like if we're looking at things in the Bible where Jesus talks about with the wheat, there'll be tares or weeds, and they're going to grow by each other. And it's only at the end of the age that the weeds will be pulled up. What does that mean? It means they tolerate each other. They have to live in the same ground. And the wheat is going to try to grow in spite of the weeds trying to choke it or take things away from it. But yeah, metaphors do break down. But the reality is if we're tolerant with others' beliefs, we don't have to agree, or their behaviors, we're going to have a changed life. Versus, I can't even tolerate that. I can't even accept that. That's not the most mature way to think about this. So then I walk away mad because the drivers drive so horribly, or because this, and this. You know, it's a great way to be miserable. So we began to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward men or women, even our enemies, for we look upon them as sick people. That's step 4. We talked about that already. So that's how we see it. In this book, we read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. Okay? So being in that state of, God, please remove from me anything that's blocking you from me. I love this prayer. There's 2 prayers that I'll jump into from 12-step people. One is, God, remove from me anything that's blocking me from you, or blocking me from your love, or blocking me from faith, or blocking me from connection with you. In essence, it's saying, God, remove my sin, but hearing it that way is pretty powerful. The other thing is, God, help me find in you what I'm looking for in this food, or this donut, or this lustful experience. Help me to find in you what I'm looking for in this shopping spree, or this fixing of others compulsively, or this alcohol, or addiction, or drugs. That's pretty powerful. It's a really very interesting prayer. Help me to find in you what I'm misguidedly looking for down here. I don't have it on the screen, but the reality is if we go down the path of what sin is missing the mark. I'm not a Greek expert, but I think the word is hamartia. It's an archery term. It means to miss the mark. You're aiming for something and you go zoom. You're aiming for something and you go zoom. So what are we aiming for? I would say that we're technically aiming for God. We're aiming for love, peace. That's why any addiction, whether it's food, sex, spending, gambling, alcohol, or drugs, work, we're looking for peace. Does it work? No. Does it last? No. But that's why we're so compulsive about it. There's something in us that wants that peace. What the 12 steps do is help us to get connected to God in this way. It says, if you have already made a decision, step 3, this is the end of page 71, and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, step 4, you have made a good beginning. That being, so that you have swallowed, so you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. That's interesting. Very interesting. So into action. Well, jumping ahead, what's cool about step 5 is that our defects of character will be cast out. It says that in the book. Why would they use such words like that? It's because there seems to be this, it's kind of like a surgery or ripping away of our character problems. It's not, I mean, sometimes I think it's demonic possession, but I think there's something, our passions possess us. They feel so close to us that there has to be a casting out of. I was always like this verse in the Bible. It says, cast your cares upon Christ, for he cares for you. I've heard it so many times, you can become kind of not really in the meaning, but it's like, so first of all, he cares for us. So I have to do the casting. So I looked it up. The words are, cast means to hurl down violently. Yeah, you cast a stone, you're trying to throw something to hurt someone. If you cast your cares, it's like it's a fight. You have to let go and hurl them down far enough away from you and then just run to God. Yeah. So our defects of character will be cast out. Our fears will fall from us. I think it's a promise, and it does seem to be that way. So having made a personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We have been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and discover the obstacles in our path. We have admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which, when completed, will mean that we will have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to step 5, or 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. It is page 72. Again, there's a repetitiveness to that, but I think it's important when they repeat over and over what you do, pretty soon it sinks in, and hopefully we actually practice it. People want to find an easier, softer way. The book will talk about that. Well, I just won't talk to this person. I just will keep it to myself. I'll just do a private confession. I'll just pray to God, to me and myself. And it just doesn't work. It's not that God can't forgive you individually, but it's not the tradition of how any of this worked, both in Christianity and in 12 steps. There is this understanding that there ought to be at least one person who knows everything about you. If you can't do that, you're not really surrendered, you're not letting go of control, and it's not going to work. I think a lot of us use this fear or concern, well, I don't want to burden someone, I don't want to take someone's time. It's like, well, you just got to risk that. It's kind of like do this or die. We just got to do it. There's something supernatural that happens, especially in the church, in the early church, where you're going to confession. Jesus says, whatever sins you retained will be retained. Whatever sins you loose will be loose. Whatever is bound on earth is bound in heaven. Whatever is loosed on earth will be loosed in heaven. There's just so many examples. Confess your sins one to another that you may be healed. This is the book of James. In fact, the AA people weren't almost called Alcoholics Anonymous. They were going to be called the James Club. And it's because they read the book of James a lot. They read the Beatitudes a lot. It's just right there. And that's what they did. So faith without works is dead. Okay, and that comes from the book of James. It says, this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much farther. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason, first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Well, that says it like it is. Time and time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives, trying to avoid this humbling experience. They have turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. So this, I can testify, I'm not trying to blame, it's just the nature of this disease. It's a very independent, I can do it myself kind of approach. And people will come in, they don't get sober, they wonder why they're not sober. It just goes on and on. Some people come back 5 years later, they go, I'm sorry to say, but I wasn't honest with you, as if I'm personally offended by this. Yeah, I'm not offended. The addiction is very powerful. And the good news is they're coming back 5 years later being honest, just to be honest with someone. And it's like, yeah, don't look back, just look forward. And just try to be honest one day at a time, and it all works out. It says, having persevered with the rest of the program, they wonder why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their housekeeping. They took inventory all right, but hanging on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves, but they had not learned enough of humility. Boy, my eyes. Fearlessness and honesty, in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their story, life story. So when the big book people had to put this in print, it cost extra money for italics. So when I say they only thought they had lost their egotism, they only thought they had humbled themselves, I put that in there for that is what they say, is that you just really think you've done it. And evidently there's just more to, deeper to go. So it's very introspective in that way. And better to err on the side of sharing everything. If you think you could pass out while sharing this stuff and cry hysterically like, I need oxygen, it's like the cabin pressure, I'm gonna pass out, just I need that oxygen. Yeah, do it. You won't die from it. You won't die from this. In fact, you'll live. Well, you'll die, your ego will die. Ego stands for edging God out. If you do this, you'll live. Yeah, even if you die, you might die a martyr's death. You know, it'd be a good thing. It's really bizarre, but no. I would go so far as our secrets could be making our immune system sick. Holding on to these grudges, these fears, just isolating. You know, Satan is into divide and conquer. So being able, and I like Mr. Rogers again, I said this last time, that which is mentionable is manageable. So he was big on just talking about things. I would say is that which is mentionable, or you bring it up in this sacred space, is healable. If you don't bring it up, you're not healed. So who is the person we should look for? Now, this is fascinating because this is AA book. Well, the bottom of page 73, we must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or persons with whom to take this intimate and confidential step. So confidential. It's okay to think and pray about just the right person. Now, this is what it says: those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course, will want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. It's really right there. Well, what if I'm not part of a religion or anything? It says, though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained by an established religion. Wait, what about sponsors and all that? Part of the story is there weren't a lot of sponsors. I mean, there were, but they really preferred that you go to someone who had some expertise and connection with God. Very interesting. It says, we often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. Why would that be? Well, maybe they're connected to God in a way. Maybe they have insight. Maybe that they see hundreds of people, heard hundreds of stories, and they're just good at it. And it's important because they help you tease out what the issues may really be. It's like going to a doctor. It says, of course, we sometimes encounter people who do not understand alcoholics. So this does happen. I know people go to confession and they clearly do not understand addiction. They say, well, try harder next time. And it's like, yeah, that's not helpful with addiction. It says, we cannot or would rather not do this. Okay, if we cannot or would rather not do this, we search our acquaintance for a closed-mouthed, understanding friend. Okay, we jump down a bit here, but we could do a closed-mouth, understanding friend. Those two elements are really important. Perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. So we've even jumped down lower. That's kind of meant to be a joke, but I do think that as useful as therapists are, which I am one, a friend can do so much more for a person than a therapist can. There are people that need hugs, not drugs. Actually, that's funny. I say that all the time. Yeah, go to a friend and get a hug. Don't go to a doctor and get a drug. Now, I'm not saying get off of all your medicine, but I think we are certainly over-medicated as people. And how well is it working for us? Huh? Is it really working really well? I don't think so. I just don't think so. If people had good friends who really loved them and could be that confidential person, and of course, they're not a priest or someone who hears a confession and can grant absolution in a supernatural way, but it's a good start. Yeah. So a friend, and then it even goes, now I'm going to get in trouble if I say this, but it's funny. I was going down lower. It may be one of our own family. Now, I'm not saying they're the bottom of the barrel that, okay, it's going to be my wife. The problem there is it says that we can easily hurt these people if we start sharing some of these dark secrets. On the other hand, I do think that families are often sick because they won't talk to each other. They won't really share what's going on. But some of these darkest things are better by another person in the program rather than a spouse, which puts a huge burden on them. And we're going to make amends. We're going to, in step 8 and 9, make amends, which is being honest and sharing our problems. There is always that risk that if I share my addiction with a spouse, my spouse may go, well, why do you do that? Like, why do you spend $2,000 at the casino? That doesn't make any sense in like 2 hours. And it's like, I don't know why. Another compulsive gambler will understand that. The problem with overeating is, this is what I see it, is that so many people do it, and it may be not killing them as fast as some people. So they nod their heads, oh yeah, I eat too many chips too. But it takes another compulsive overeater or an anorexic person who struggles with anorexia or bulimia to really get it and understand it. So you could share those things, but what we're sharing really isn't just our using of addictions, it's the resentments and the fears. So if we're sharing, I have a resentment towards my wife and my children, well, that is not the person to share it with. I need to take it to a sponsor or someone in the program. And I'll repeat this. The ism, most isms are a bad thing, like capitalism, communism. So alcoholism. ISM stands for I sponsor myself. Yeah. And so step 5 is the antithesis of that, that I don't lead myself, I ask for direction. So it says it may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or our parents which would hurt them or make them unhappy. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. So that's another rule. The rule is that we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. And that's a really good rule. That's third paragraph down on page 72. Now, there's a lot of people who are going to say, I'm hard on myself already. And yeah, I'm certainly aware of that. I work with this all the time. If someone really is really hard on themselves, down on themselves, but they're also an addict, how I help them is to realize that that's being self-obsessed, going on and on about how bad they are as a person. That's still self-obsession. And so you need some help to have someone help you. And it's not truthful. If you're saying I'm the worst person in the world, or I've never done anything good, or God never loves me, I mean, these things are lies. They're not true. So we need someone to help us precisely see what defect of character we're going to be praying away in 6 and 7. So being hard on oneself, though, is being precise at getting well. If I'm sick as a dog and go into the doctor's office and talk about my wife and my children, well, that's not going to help anything. I need to talk about me and what I am doing wrong. Yeah, I could go on and on about why I use and all this. No, the reason I use is I'm an addict. It's that simple. The program says the reasons why we use are unimportant. So be careful where therapists try to help you analyze things to death. That would be just more self-obsession. So 5th step inventory, or 4th step with this is very short, it's precise, it's very surgical, and you then humbly ask God to remove these defects of character. So say like I go through this and I realize there's 5 things about myself. I'm really controlling, I'm too sensitive, I catastrophize, just if I got rid of those 3. But I'm selfish, like I really want things how I want things, and I'm too smart for my own good. I better remember these 3. So I'm praying, God, help me not be controlling, help me to be accepting, help me not to be so sensitive, help me to be tough, resilient. Well, too smart for my own britches. Help me to be humble. Help me to realize I do not know everything. Help me to realize I know only a little. To fault finding or critical, help me to be accepting and kind. But you get the point. When you write this down on a little white card and you put it by your prayer corner, that's what you're going to be praying for. That's all step 4 really is all these stories amount to what are distilled my character defects or passions. If God answers these prayers, I'll have a changed life. Yeah, it's that simple. It's that powerful. So the bottom of page 74, notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be one so situated that there is no suitable person available. If that is so, this step may be postponed. Only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through with it at the first opportunity. I'll admit, I read this yesterday and it's like, does it really say that we can postpone this? But I think the thing is you just can't do this with everybody. But I see more of a problem is that people just postpone this. The devil says, repent tomorrow. There's always this thing, I'll do something tomorrow. And I think that's one of the bigger lies we're going to face, that when we're on our deathbed, we're going to ask ourselves, did I really live life with the readiness of always trying to seek God? And that's why I think it's a waste of time going down these paths of look what's happening in the world and all that drama. We say this because we are very anxious to talk to the right person. It is important that he be able to keep the confidence, that he fully understand and approve what we are driving at, that he will not try to change our plan. What does that mean? Well, if you go to a therapist, they may analyze and say, well, your mother was kind of rough on you. It's like, no, you don't need that. You need someone who knows how to stick to your part in this, not their part. Understanding of how painful it is, but understanding that the only freedom you're going to get is from forgiveness, letting it go. But we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. Again, this idea of dragging through the steps is just foreign. We don't waste any time. We have a written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. So written inventory could make people go, oh no, it's going to be, you have to write it all out and that could take months. No, I would just make a list. And if you've done this with your sponsor has actually made the list with you. We explain to our partner that what we're about to do and why we have to do it. We should realize that we are engaged on a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. So what happens? Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we have begun to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink, or the drugging, or the overeating, the undereating, the sexing, spending, the gambling, the working, and the codependency problem will have disappeared will often come suddenly or strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. So powerful, just really powerful. If we experience step 5, you will have a spiritual experience. Those who are Christian and have a faith tradition which encourages confession, I would quickly go do this. Explain to your priest that this confession may be more precise or whatever, but just go to it. It works. It works really, really well. How much of a part do we have in it? We just have to be willing and honest, a little bit organized. But if we're not honest, it doesn't work. If we're not willing to let God have removed these things, it doesn't work. If we're totally disorganized, don't want to write anything down, just keep it in our head, I wonder how much of that is a cover for us not taking it seriously. So very powerful. We don't skimp, or I made this up, we don't skip this step or skimp on this step. We don't skip or skimp. People will do their 4th step, but just don't really have a powerful 5th. And if we skimp on it, it's really not going to work. The opposite is entirely honest. If we're entirely honest, we'll have a spiritual experience. We will feel the freedom, and it does come. People go, I feel like for the first time, they say, I might not drink again. Yeah. Then they make the connection that if we use that artery metaphor, I should bring this up more often and have it available. But it's like that's when the cleaning out of all those defects of character were. And that's where we feel this power come in. But it also comes in step 3, where we've turned our will and our life over to the care of God. So reviewing our work, I make it step 5.5, not to make it complicated, but it says at the bottom of the page, 75, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. So I believe in doing this. Now, we know that the early days, they did steps 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and 9. I mean, 8 very much in one setting. For some reason in the book, it talks about splitting it up a bit, but let's go along with splitting it up. Okay, so you've done your 5th step. Here's my problem with that now is leaving a person vulnerable without saying, well, pray for this defect. See, step 6 is once you know your defects, you become entirely ready to have God remove the defect. Well, sure. That's like going in and doing exploratory surgery and seeing all those defects right there while the blood isn't getting to the person. Well, if we're there already with the camera, why don't we scoop it all out, get all that plaque out? So entirely ready? Yes, I'm entirely ready. I just shared all this. 7, humbly ask God to remove these defects of character. And in the early days, it said on their knees in the original manuscript. So they just got on their knees and say, God, please take from me all these defects of character. It wasn't any more complex than that. And it's helpful to just say it what they are. Step 8, well, you already made a list of all the people you've harmed. In essence, by doing this whole process, I've hurt my mother, my father, my family members, my wife, my children, my employer. You just make those lists. Okay, you are done, at least for the day. What do I leave them with? Pray every day and ask God to guide you. And then we meet as soon as we can to do steps 9. And often in the early days, they would drive around in the car and wait in the car while they were talking with all these people to make amends. And we'll talk about that when we get to that step. I honestly thought about doing it the way I would do it in real life, but you'd end up with 3 or 4 hour video. No one can sit through that. Unless they're a screen addict. No. So it's split up just so that it's small pieces to digest. But in reality, in practice, you do it all together. So returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. So you actually thank God. Taking this book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps, which should be page 59. So you just turn to there. If you want to be accurate, just do what it says humbly. So you don't have to get a shelf and pull it down from the shelf, but it says, okay, you go through those steps. I admit I am powerless over alcohol. My life is unmanageable. You ponder that. Am I really admitting that? Is my work firm there? Yes, it is. Do I believe in a power greater than myself, which will restore me to sanity? Yes. Am I willing to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand God? Yes. Did I just make an inventory? So it says carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have admitted anything. Now, why do they put this in there? Because addicts, we somehow overlook things. We just leave out stuff. For we are building on an arch for which we should walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Okay. So yeah, that thoroughness is really important. It says, if we answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. Okay. So in steps 6 and 7, we'll probably be going together next week. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We are real busy, but it's important to me to try to make this a dialogue, back and forth. So anyway, I wish you guys well in your journey of recovery. You take care and have a great evening.